Well, okay, everybody. Want to welcome you to our little discussion here. I'm here with Greg Martini. A little bit of a background on Greg. Greg was the vice president, executive vice president. I remember at
Yeah.
SAP America. Had been involved a long, long time. He and I go very well back in shared experiences in the ERP world, ERP space. But he had been Greg worked with me at FMC, went to SAP, was involved with, it really had seen pretty much the full arc of the whole
Mm.
SAP experience over the years, and then has been a also a executive VP at ICMS.
ICIMS. Yep.
ICMS.
Mm.
So he comes from the executive level, but he also has very deep hands-on expertise. So he's somebody who's really has worked in the trenches, kind of working our way through here. So, Greg, I appreciate you taking the time. So
Absolutely.
we'll see how this goes. So I guess maybe as a starting point, we're talking in our class, what we've been talking about is the role of like ERP. And well, the class in general is like kind of the whole landscape of technology and business. And a big part of that is ERP systems and the whole how that came to be. It just didn't show up one day. It was like the
Mm.
whole kind of trend. There was a process that was involved with this, with a lot of people making a lot of decisions over a period of time. So, and one of the things we've talked about, what we covered in the class, it was not the amount of change that these things bring, that these types of applications bring, and whether organizations were, whether they were aware of what they were getting into. They've actually, if you look back now, you see now, oh yeah, organizations like, a lot of organizations have been very successful with it. You look at, from my experience in my universe, it was DuPont and Campbell's and FMC and all those companies all had implemented it and it were tremendously successful, but not without adventures. And one of the things, the experiences I had was, when we did FMC, I came out of the FMC thinking, oh, we have all the answers. And I walked straight into American Water and I realized that the game had, it's like, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to be happening. We had a lot of the same stuff or even worse. So it was like kind of just when you think you know everything, you realize you know nothing. So maybe just to start off with, from your experience, what do you think maybe was the biggest challenge that organizations faced when they were putting in like the SAP ERP system?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. And first of all, thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks everybody for taking the time. Um, I, I so when I look at the time that I've spent doing work with SAP,
Mm.
things have changed
Mm.
drastically. And I think you alluded to that a little bit, and the things that are we've discovered now are extremely important,
Mm.
weren't things that we would have thought
Mm.
that we'd be thinking about today. And I'll
Right.
give you an example. Pardon me. One of we don't talk a lot about integrators
Hmm.
who we're working with, right? We talk about the businesses themselves, that are doing the implementation. We talk
Hmm.
about SAP, and
Hmm.
leveraging consulting and help from SAP,
Hmm.
but a critical aspect is really the integrators who we hire on with
Hmm.
to do this work. And something that I've seen time and time again is that the negotiation with an
Hmm.
integrator to bring them into this program
Hmm.
is that success or failure
Hmm.
can really mean a lot as you go through the program.
Hmm.
And what happens, and by that I'm really talking about an exercise in, I'll call it headbutting,
Hmm.
until we come to a number
Hmm.
that different people within an organization are satisfied with,
Right.
and what they you mentioned FMC Corporation, so
Right.
I'll use that as an example. So FMC Corporation um, leveraged PwC
Right.
as
For
their
sure.
integrator, and so and back then, they were as good as anybody who was out
Hmm.
there doing this kind of work. Um, but but in the negotiation, the press was so hard on the pure money aspect
Hmm. Yeah.
that I think we made mistakes.
Yep.
And yeah, people walked away from that negotiation high-fiving, if you will,
Hmm.
on gee, we knocked the rates down to this and we're
Hmm.
that and we've been able to manage this.
Right.
But in the end, you pay that money anyway.
It comes
Um,
back. It comes back. That was the thing. It
it,
really, is,
yeah,
I always like to tell a story. I told the story to the class about the guy from Chicago who wrote the message. He was when, we had to send everything to Chicago, and somebody looked at what the proposal was for the ERP project. It's like, my God, this could cost $6 million. And they're like, oh my God. They're like, if you had any clue of what this was going to be, because they said
yeah,
nobody really knew. The thing was funny about the FMC stuff, that the true number of what that actually, what that spend was kind of maintained as a state secret, but it was definitely far north of what the original numbers were.
yeah,
It was, and it
and
didn't, and not knowing what you don't know, that was,
mhm,
I think early on, I think that the early experience from early implementers, I
mhm,
think that was one of the things, and I think even through, we'll talk a little bit about Hershey, but that
mhm.
was one of the, that was, it took a while before people had enough expertise to really be able to
Yeah,
intelligently deal with this stuff.
yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's a big aspect, and kind of one of the things that ties in with that is the limit of scope
Hmm.
within a program.
Yeah.
It's very easy to come in and say, okay, what segments of your business are you going to be working on,
Hmm.
in terms of this program? Well, yeah, what segments? And the answer oftentimes is all of it. We're just
Hmm.
we're gonna plug this thing, these discs in, we're gonna hit Control Alt Delete, and then we're gonna be live.
Because it's a
And
computer. How tough could it
it,
be?
yeah, exactly. And so those things, we've learned a lot about that,
Hmm.
and the reality of the negotiation and what you're truly gonna get.
Hmm.
It should set people back to understand that better.
Hmm.
And so, in terms of successful programs, those are the ones
Hmm.
that people have a strong understanding up front about what this will actually cost us. And the ones where you have good, honest discussions
Hmm.
with your CFO on what this is truly going to be.
Hmm.
And we'll talk a little bit more, I surmise, about some of the executive involvement,
Hmm.
but
Yep.
but the key here is really understanding all this up front.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so. I think actually it's a good segue because we're talking around. We start talking about the executive level because this stuff really, these things, these types of projects are, enterprise level. So they are basically capital projects. So this is
Mhm.
all, the board of directors are signing off on these things. It's at the highest level of the organization, and the challenge is, the idea theoretically, theoretically, it should be you're going in there and the executives are leading the way, and the thing was, I don't think they understood what they had signed up for. So a lot of, they were kind of, because the things would be is, they go in there, VPs will come in and go, I'm 100% behind you. Hey, we'll work arm in arm in this. That's the last you see of them, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The kickoff meeting, the kickoff lunch, because we got free lunch, and then they're and then they come back when basically for the first meeting when all hell is broken loose and what's going on here?
yeah.
because the idea would be is you really do need somebody at the top who understands it and can, ask intelligent questions and drive the stuff through. And I think a lot of the stuff I think one thing I think from a timing perspective is we talk about
Mhm.
generations of leadership. I mean, we're looking at the generation of leadership in that time frame. They came up in like the 70s and the 80s and stuff. So they were very, very immersed in that culture, kind of how, like kind of like like the Mad Men, kind of like kind of like that, kind of old
Yeah.
timey, old white guys, from central casting coming in.
Mm.
And, that was not their idea of like actually engaging and understanding the implications of what this stuff did, even in their own businesses. I think that was the thing that, to me was interesting, alarming. Yeah. It's like,
Mhm.
you don't know. I think now though, now maybe you've seen it in other organizations. Is the people, the executives you have dealt with, are they more cognizant of this stuff and kind of what it means and what the implications are that when you implement systems like this?
Sure. And there's a couple things, at play here. One is, yeah, it's a little better now than it used to be.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is people move from company to company.
Hmm.
And part of a resume,
Hmm.
or a LinkedIn profile or, whatever
Right.
it is, people use, um, part of that is a description of your experience leveraging these solutions. And one of the things that it's critically important, and I think we're seeing it more and more,
Hmm.
is the notion that this is not an IT project. This is a business transformation program. And
Capital
that
B.
is, and that is where we run into problems, or
Hmm.
we have in the past run into problems because you're not plugging a piece of IT in,
Hmm.
and just crossing your fingers that it's going to work in your business.
Hmm.
But what you're doing is, first thing you're doing is you're going to redefine your business to improve
Hmm.
the business, your processes, the way that you do things, and
Hmm.
then you're going to leverage the software solution as the tool to
Right.
get you into that new place where you want to be. And that's really the key to this, to
Hmm.
success here. And because it's kind of a funny thing, a difference that you'll hear is, I call it, a walking down the hall discussion.
Hmm.
Somebody will, be talking to an executive in a company, and where you're going to fail
Hmm.
is if the communication sounds like, hey, Bob, what about that IT? What about that big project that they're spending all this money
Money
on?
on.
And his response will be, yeah, don't worry about that. That's just that IT thing.
Hmm.
Well, if that's the answer that you're getting
Hmm.
from the woman that's the CFO, or the woman that's the COO,
Hmm.
then you're destined to fail.
Hmm.
Because they are some of the top backers within the company.
Right.
If
I
they're
think
not
a lot of
there,
times they see it from, really from the financial side. I mean, I think it goes back to
yeah,
the days
yeah,
of, a lot of the folks back in that time, they were from the age of, well, IT is something that's in the back room, and
mm-hmm,
we just shovel money on it, and it just, and not realizing what the implications are when you
right,
start touching some of this stuff. Like,
mm-hmm, that's exactly
we
right.
don't really know how it works, but here, let's push this button, see what ooh, that was good. Hey, let's try this one. So I think that was eye-opening, and it
Yeah,
was an experience that I think people learned. I mean, they learned quite a bit from it. It was like,
yeah.
note to self, don't ever do that again. Now,
Right.
you had some experience. I know one of the things that we talked about, you had been involved. I think one of the areas of your expertise was you were like the person they would send in, the special, the special guy they would parachute into situations to, turn things around, right? And the whole,
Yeah.
hold it together. So like, yeah, I know, I think we were talking one time the story about Roman Haas and
Yeah.
that was actually a mutiny in a plant and the plant refused to do the work or something. What was that story?
We had some issues where and this kind of goes back to a problem that can occur within some of these projects that we have, and they are and the problems, there's a lot of different things that
Mhm.
can happen, but one of them is poor communications
Mhm.
and a poor program structure, right?
Mhm.
And it starts from a steering committee level, which we've already
Yeah.
discussed, or the top executive level.
Right.
It starts from that layer, and then it trickles into the organization.
Hmm.
But what happens is, and what happened at Roman Haas is, we had a plant that was going to be one of the early adopters,
Hmm.
and they didn't see it that way,
Hmm.
and so and they were the part of the issue was the plant was in France,
Hmm.
and they really wanted us to implement this in French.
Hmm.
And so, which, yeah, hey, listen, if I were in France, how would I want it implemented? In
Hmm.
France, I mean, but people have to understand that, what the good and the bad are of something
Hmm.
like that. And what they also have to understand is that there are some things that you have to give up
Hmm.
to improve the entire organization, and that might make it more convenient
Hmm.
for one plant. And that's the situation that we had here. And we had people who just said, "I'm not doing this. Good luck." And we had to bring in some of the top executives saying, "Well, it is your option. You can leave."
Hmm.
And so, things like that happen when you have poor communications at the
Hmm.
very beginning, and you don't have the right people
Hmm.
at the helm, messaging properly. And
It's also a
those are the things
European
that occur.
problem, if you recall.
Mm.
If you recall Denmark,
Yeah,
Denmark
yeah,
and
yeah.
Ireland, and because we actually in the FMC project, those were those were I won't call them problem children, but they each one
Mm.
had their own kind of unique approach to dealing with stuff. And they were
Yeah.
if you were, and especially in international,
Mm.
it was interesting because SAP was a German company, and I remember the situation in Denmark where
Hmm.
some of the consultants were German, and they were talking to the folks who in the Denmark plant, the plant were Danish,
Hmm.
and they were having a very, pivot, really pitched discussion
Hmm.
about, it was something like the chart of accounts or the bill of materials or something.
Yeah.
But the reality was, and you listen, you're like, they're not talking about that. They're talking about you invaded us during World War II. That was one of those things, you don't find that in the book. It's like, hey, that's not, that's so.
And kidding aside, and we are just, ribbing each other on this, but the fact is, it's easy to step back and say, wow, what a problem this place or that place is
Yeah,
causing us. But boy, try and do it without their help.
right.
What
Well,
I mean,
exactly.
without the knowledge that they have of the business,
Yeah.
you're gonna fail. It's
Yeah.
it's a
And that was,
recipe for disaster.
yeah, actually,
So
I know the thing with
yeah,
Ireland, the folks in Ireland, which is plant was in Cork, Ireland. I think their concern was they were an independent company, and they basically were still resisting, the fact that they were acquired, and so they were very reluctant to do things like share information. Well, how do we do this, and how do you do
yeah,
that? What are you
yeah,
doing here, and what are you doing there? So
sure,
that was
sure.
another one of those kind of cultural issues that we had been involved with. Now also ran into something at the New York Times, right? That was kind of interesting because SAP, to give you an idea, is okay, you can implement it in manufacturing companies. I mean, you have a lot of
Mm.
manufacturing, but you can even implement it for things like newspapers. So,
Oh yeah,
but I
yeah,
think you got parachuted into that to kind of bring order from
yeah,
the house.
yeah. That was fun. The the New York Times, yeah, uh, again, a phenomenally smart group of people. Just like
Hmm.
I'd say, the people that we were dealing with in France,
Hmm.
extremely, sharp group of people. The Danes, a really, really sharp
Hmm.
group that really knew their stuff. But when it came to any of these businesses, if you didn't bring the people along into that journey
Hmm.
the right way from the very beginning and really let them know of their importance
Hmm.
in this program, then you were doomed. I
Right.
mean, because it's very easy for somebody to sit and fold their arms
Hmm.
and just say, well, you obviously don't need me because you
Hmm.
haven't asked my opinion and da 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 da. But when you think of the number of people that you're dealing within the company, to do one of these programs, it's a lot. It's vast. The
Yeah.
skill sets are crazy,
Yeah.
but you really, really need them,
And
and
it's so
yeah.
different than what they were working with before. Basically, a lot of times companies, a lot of ways, they're like turned inside out and kind of
Hmm.
stripped down to bare bones and
Yeah.
put back together. And not everybody adapts well to that
Yeah.
environment.
Do there's another thing that I kind of want to interject here at this time because it's relevant with the New York Times. One of the things about them is that um, they did what I'll call one of the cardinal sins of
Hmm.
SAP programs, and that's to have too many large initiatives running at the same time.
Hmm.
When you're implementing SAP in a broad fashion,
Hmm.
you have to really understand that it can't be one of six things that you're doing that are six mission critical things.
Right.
It has to be the thing that you're working on. Maybe there can be two,
Hmm.
but you're really
Nothing more,
stretching it,
not that much more. Yeah.
right. And at the New York Times, they thought it might be a good idea for them, for the first time in New York Times history, to move their building.
Oh,
So
oh,
they
so this is
were,
when they were moving into the new building.
yeah, they were building the new
Yeah, the new
building,
building.
designing and building the new building
Hmm.
and moving into it and doing
Doing
an
that.
SAP project. And just to make it a little easier,
Hmm.
the CIO was the same person who was in charge of the build for the new building.
Oh, so
So yeah,
he's got lots of idle time on his hands
yeah,
then.
yeah, that's exactly right. But the thing is, if anyone could ever do it, this guy could do it. He was a brilliant guy.
Hmm.
But the answer is nobody can do that. And
Right.
and it was so difficult that that's a path to success or a path to failure.
Yeah.
If you try to bite off too much, you're
Hmm.
not going to win here.
Yeah. So, so we talked about in our class. What I always like to bring up, my probably one of yours favorite projects, the infamous Hershey project,
Hmm.
the one where SAP was responsible for kids not getting their candy on Halloween. So, which like, oh my God, and
Yeah.
as I said, the thing that was interesting about it was the fact that they went back and they re-implemented the same system. They didn't
Hmm.
put a new system in. They just went back and re-implemented it, and it worked, and it's been working for 25 years. But
Yeah.
you were there, but now I don't think you were directly involved. They didn't parachute you into that one.
No.
You were spared that. But well, what was
Yeah.
SAP's perspective on that? And because obviously because quite frankly, they took a big hit on that, a big hit.
Oh,
Because they were
oh,
on the
sure.
front page of, on the Wall Street Journal about, oh, look, SAP is like, driving this poor company into the ground.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was, I mean, listen, when somebody once said, hey, if you're 10 steps out in front of everybody,
Hmm.
you're a leader. If you're 20 steps out in front, you're a target.
Right.
And and and
Yeah.
and that that was
They were at
that was
ground.
kind of
The thing was interesting. So
that was
I always say about SAP projects, if you talk to anybody who's involved, everyone had challenges. Everything had, but
yeah.
not everyone got to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And
No,
I think
no,
that
that
was just it was now part of it was we talked about in the class the timing issues and basically another one
hmm
of those trying to do way too much, way too fast,
sure.
and they had the artificial. They were pushed by the artificial idea of Y2K. We have to get this thing about Y2K because Y2K will make everything
hmm
stop working. So they were racing against that,
Yeah.
against that deadline, and they basically just they pushed it and they went to push the button and it just, there were holes in it. And the thing that was
Sure.
really scary about it was it wasn't like it was readily apparent. It would be much better, I think, if they had pushed the button and the whole thing would gone up in smoke.
Yeah.
Because then you just go
Uh,
back to the old system. But
yeah,
what ended
yeah.
up happening was they ended up like they started down the path. So they were like weeks into it, and they
hmm
started realizing that things weren't adding up and things weren't
Yeah.
working. And
Yeah.
the complexity of an integrated system is such that it's not like you can just go to one spot and push a button. It's like, well,
hmm
you've got to understand how all these things. Once you start something, and the expectation is once you start it, it's got to go to the end, and you have to
Yeah.
account for the end. It's not like you can leave these things hanging out there. And
Yeah. I'm
that was really one of the things that I think that from a, they learn the hard way. But I think
hmm
because it was also they were also putting a Siebel CRM in. They were also using
yeah.
Manugistics. And Manugistics in itself, those
Oh,
manufacturing systems can be mind-bendingly complicated. And then you're going to try to integrate it to SAP, and you've never done it
yeah.
before.
Yeah. I mean
Nobody had
that
ever done that
I
before.
was just gonna say nobody had done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's one of the things, and it's an ego thing
Hmm.
too. Like you just brought up about, a bunch of great points on, hey, it was untenable
Hmm.
to stop, throw it away, and
Right.
continue with your old systems.
Right.
Because there was a CIO there who was beating his chest saying, "Watch me go.
Hmm.
I'm gonna be the guy that does all these things." And then just as quick as that, they developed the coat of arms at
Right.
SAP, which, it's that, you know.
It's
So,
not my fault.
right. And so, you had, there were problems all over the place, but
Hmm.
um, the only one that could really stand up
Hmm.
and say, we have to make this,
Hmm.
we've got to do this, is SAP.
Yeah.
It was our brand, it was our solution. If we would have stepped back and said, hey, let's wait, let's do it another
Hmm.
time. First it would have hurt Hershey,
Right.
because,
And they
the
were
kid,
already hurt. I mean, their stock price
yeah,
had already cratered. And
yeah, right. Well, more importantly, the candy bags were only that
well,
full,
exactly. Kids weren't,
yeah,
no
but
Hershey bars that year.
hmm I could have used that year, by
There
the
you
way.
go.
But the fact is, the doing it the way that they did it
Hmm.
was a limited success factor.
Yeah.
You're gonna take a look at this and say, hey, what pieces are we gonna do first?
Hmm.
Now everybody would do it that way. Everybody would say, wait a minute, we're going to go live on Halloween.
Hmm.
Well, that's our biggest time.
Right.
So guess what? We're going to only go live with the candy that tastes like cough medicine.
Hmm.
We're going to go live with that stuff first.
Right.
And then we're gonna, then Reese's Cups. Then we're gonna do York peppermint pies. And then, so they're gonna God, do I know too much about their
Yeah,
candy?
they were.
So, but the fact is breaking it up.
Mhm.
There's lots of ways to do that, and they could have still waved the flag of success.
Mhm.
But instead, they said, no, we
Well, there
want to
was
do
the
it all.
there was the
What
cult of
happened?
Big Bang is I think
Yeah,
that's one of the things. I
yeah,
think that was another one of these learning experiences when they went into it is well, there's only one way you can turn the system on, and that's
yeah,
turn everything else off and then flip the switch and run for cover. And it was
yeah,
like, and looking back on it, it's like, well, maybe that wasn't the only way you could do it.
yeah,
Maybe you want to think this through a little bit more clearly. I think,
yeah,
but they had go fever. I mean, you can see because I think that was the driver. So we have to get this thing in.
yeah.
Committed to the board of directors. We've committed to the organization. We're 100%. So we will make it so. And the problem is, no, you can't just make it so. It's not like,
No.
if everybody who believes in fairies claps their hands, Tinker.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way. It's a lot
Hmm.
of work. I mean, and you have to work through the fundamentals. So,
Hmm.
what did you guys just send a crew in there to kind of
Yeah.
stabilize it and then
Yeah. So
get
what?
through the issues, right?
Yeah, so what we did was, and we around that time we developed teams that if there were problems in specific key areas,
Hmm.
you'd go work on those things, and you just go focus and repair, focus and repair. I did that for a number of projects. We mentioned the New York Times.
Yeah,
Bayer was
there,
another
right.
one
That
that
was the other one. Yeah.
I did a bunch of work for them. A little company called J&J.
Hmm.
I think they're still around. And but companies like that, they
Hmm.
they just, and they a lot of them suffered the same things,
Yeah.
but
Was Hershey the worst, or was Hershey was the best, most, or the best known? I think that was maybe
yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah,
Hershey was a political,
yeah,
time bomb, and it was also Hershey was one of the earliest,
yeah. Well, they were in
so
our time frame. They were in the
yeah,
97, 98, 99, which
yeah,
we
exactly. Yeah.
we didn't know what the hell we were doing. Oh, that's
Yeah.
what that does. I didn't know. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. So. But it was interesting that kind of across the board, it was like if you go back and you talk to people, if you go out and you do a search, Google search on like SAP failures,
Mhm.
you'll see, there's other projects that have pretty significant problems. I mean, now
Yeah.
some of them were a lot of them had to deal with the organization was just not able to adapt to that kind of
Hmm.
a rigor and a structure. They were just never.
Sure.
I've said, I said when I was in American Water, I said there are certain organizations in this world that should not try to implement stuff like this.
Yeah. No, it's
And that
true.
was
I
it didn't
mean,
endear me with people, but it was also, yeah, it's not
yeah,
necessarily, you know,
yeah, it's,
untrue. It was like, certain organizations really have to, kind of maybe be better off not trying to do this.
yeah,
But a couple teams, I think it was Estee Lauder, I think was one.
yeah,
I think Nike
yeah.
was another one. But a lot of these, I think a lot of these were very specialized.
Hmm.
Like for example, I think the shoe business. The shoe business has
Yeah.
all sorts of very specialized things within it, which does not line up specifically
Mm.
with kind of that kind of core. And quite frankly, what they did was critical to their business. So they
Oh,
said, well,
yeah,
we'll put this in no matter what. We'll make
yeah,
it work.
yeah. And that's, yeah, I mean, you're dead on. I mean, uh, one of the things that we found as we grew and grew was that we needed to make industry solutions,
Yep.
right? So that our focus then wouldn't be how do we fit this round peg into a square hole.
Hmm.
It was more, here's a solution that we're going to use, and in that way
Hmm.
we could train the customers prior to the program and have the very, very open and direct conversation
Hmm.
about this isn't going to be the system that you just
Left.
left. Okay. And it's, you know, there was a CIO, a woman, she was actually in that industry, and in the clothing industry. And
Hmm.
she, one of her favorite sayings was, um, it was, um, there's no system better than the one you just migrated from.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
and but people would complain and complain about this new system because it didn't do everything. Well, you should never have that happen. People should understand what are going to be the difficulties. People
Yeah,
should know what to expect.
yeah,
And if they didn't, then the communications program didn't really work the way it
yeah.
should have. So,
So, so I know SAP did as over the years. Now there was a, there was everybody learned. I think that was the thing. It was
mhm,
massively, drinking out of a fire hose kind of learning. And I know over the time, SAP really developed a lot of different innovations, both into the product and also around the methodologies for implementing and supporting them. All right.
mhm,
But one thing I saw was that it was really difficult to get people to go back and use them or go back, if they went through and they got something like, I guess what they call, what was the product solution manager,
yeah,
which if you looked at what, the idea behind what solution manager was, it was supposed to be a central repository of, well, this is where all our business processes are designed,
mhm,
and this is how we roll, and this is how we monitor this, and kind of across the board. But I mean, I had, oh my God, a couple times going through trying to evangelize. Well, we really need to do this, and
mhm.
getting phenomenal pushback. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
in all sorts of ways. Like, we won't do that. We can't do that. We can't. So I was always wondering about, kind of one of the challenges that from the SAP side. How did I guess that was I guess that was seen, but kind of what was, I guess, kind of the response on the SAP side around that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were a few things. So, I can say as I grew up with SAP, and you recall this too, I'm sure, but when we first got the version that we could go live on,
Hmm.
the mappings, the data maps and everything,
Yep.
they were all in German abbreviations.
I
And
remember that.
yeah,
The
I
error
know.
messages were all, you had to have a German dictionary because it's something would
Yeah,
pop up on the screen and you'd have
yeah.
to go back and is that a good message or a bad
Yeah,
message?
exactly. And so that really pushed the notion of, instead of changing that
Hmm.
and making that something that, oh, we're gonna, change it to English abbreviations, which still won't mean much to a lot of people,
Right,
we're going to change it to business process names.
right.
And that, that helped us to take two steps forward, two
Hmm.
pretty large steps forward instead of just one.
Yeah,
And also to turn the solution into a business solution,
right.
right? As opposed to an IT solution for
Right.
business, right? And so there was a lot of work that went into that. The
Hmm.
problem was, by that time, there were a lot of people who already knew how to use the system as it was built.
Yep.
And and um and so the consulting workforce
Hmm.
who knew that stuff, they kind of, it helped them
Hmm.
if they kept it in a drawer,
Right.
in a,
Stiff armed it, kind of do a stiff arm
yeah.
of the, because I think if I recall, they actually, one of the things that you guys had put together was a complete implementation project plan.
Hmm.
Basically, so it wasn't,
Yeah.
obviously, it would have to be adapted and fitted, but basically it laid out all of the different, this, you got to do this, you got to do this, these are
Yeah.
the steps, these are the sequences, all this stuff. And I remember, because if you recall early on, it was like
Mhm.
that was kind of the secret sauce that the consulting partners all brought. Oh, we have
Yeah.
our methodology. We were bringing our
Right.
methodology, so like, so, and so if you change, if you change your vendor, if you change your consulting vendor, well, you couldn't
Hmm.
use any of their stuff because that was all proprietary their
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah.
you had to, and then so there's kind of a mystery, the mystery. This is our our secret sauce implementation methodology, which if you go back, it was exactly the same thing you guys had put out there. You could access it on the
Yeah.
internet and use it. So it was like kind of a, that they changed the words and they kind of, they kind of
Sure. Sure.
add some more fruit salad on top of it. But it was pretty much,
Mhm.
there's ways you do this stuff to do it the right way. You know, so
And
a lot of, and the thing that was funny
yeah.
was a lot of what their methodology ended up being is people writing basically books, of documentation and stuff. I mean, basically,
Oh yeah.
killing trees and, there's they would end up writing all these documentations, and nobody ever used them. It was
Yeah.
the thing that
Yeah.
was interesting for me was after we had, when we had as we were in the implementation. So I think some at FMC they had basically some of the stuff had gone live and there was stuff still in the pipeline, but I think everybody was on the where all the consultants are at. We're on the 15th floor.
Hmm.
And I went down to 15th floor one time and I'm walking around and it was like one of these things. It was like one of these like movies where everybody was vanished off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
It was like you go around and all the desks, people are there's still stuff there. There's still cups of coffee sitting around.
Mhm.
Everybody
Yeah.
was like, you know,
Yeah.
grabbed out of the
Yeah.
building. It's like I always told
Yeah.
people it was more a matter of, they came in, it's like they don't have any more money. Just quietly go out the door. But that was the thing. It was like
Yeah.
we were looking at how much stuff they had done. And it was like, a lot of the stuff they did was not necessarily pointed at getting it, it was like they did a lot, they did
Mhm.
tons of documentation, but not necessarily any of it ever got really used.
No,
So
that's
what was the point?
exactly
It
right.
was kind of
Yeah.
interesting. It was interesting stuff, but I know that was the thing that always struck me was like, they've already, SAP is actually going out there because I think you guys were always getting caught with the, you were having a problem and it's their fault, because
Hmm.
the implementation partners, that is just, you said at the beginning, the implementation partners, the relationship between SAP and the implementation partners was was interesting
Yeah.
to say the least, because it was always, they would come in, implementation partners. It was like there's X amount of budget for this project.
Hmm.
Well, we're going to get 95% of that budget. And
Yeah.
that's basically, and
Yeah.
then as opposed to, well, this is what we need in terms of resource. No, it was basically, it doesn't matter what they were going to do. They were just going to get
Yeah.
95% of that money. It was like, which
Yeah.
made for, for some crazy stuff, kind of
Hmm.
crazy, ways of, interactions. But
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
remember, well, AW, American Water, I was like, well, I was pushing, I said, well, we need to have, we really want to make sure we have, you know, SAP expertise on these project teams. Oh, yes, we
Hmm.
agree 100%. We're going to have, we'll definitely have, we're tied into them. And we are so simpatico with them. And
Hmm.
somebody came in, there were people assigned the first day within 6 weeks. Where's so? Oh, he's not here
Yeah.
anymore. And so
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you look around and it's like they pushed all the all the SAP people out. There was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the thing was they were the people who really knew more than anything else about
Yeah.
how things were working, or had the connections and the people in the
Hmm.
organizations that you can go back to and say, yeah, look at this, look at that, look at this, look at that. So
Yeah.
but I thought that was a
Mhm.
it was a very interesting dynamic around that.
Oh yeah.
And there's some implementation partners were very good, and then other
Hmm.
ones were, and it was almost by office by office. It wasn't even a
Yeah.
matter of like the entire organization. Some projects I've seen, the people they had working on it were top notch, did a
Hmm.
tremendous job. Other ones, it was like, have you ever seen this thing before?
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah. I
like
mean, it
something?
was, but Rich, to your point, I mean, it was an evolution. I
Mhm.
mean, the fact was, in the beginning, we said in the beginning, hey, it was German, it was all German coding and things. So when there
Engineering,
was
yes.
yeah, so and it was unbelievable software.
Mhm.
And then what happened was we needed to make it something that was more business process
Mhm.
oriented, and we had to align that with the implementation itself. So we
Mhm.
came up with this thing called ASAP.
Right.
which was our
That was the project methodology.
implementation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the implementation methodology. And then we knew that if we did that, what we could do is for the implementation partners, like the Deloittes and the
Right.
Accentures, they had to kind of fall within that frame,
Right.
or they weren't doing what SAP recommended.
Right.
And so,
Because going on, there wasn't anything like that.
mm-mm,
And that was so they would so
yeah,
that was basically an opportunity to, well, we have to write that. We'll have to
yeah,
develop from we'll have to
yeah,
invent from thin air. So we won't, it won't
no,
be a matter of
that's right.
here's an existing framework. Part of
Hmm.
what we need to do is actually build for you, and it'll be, the it was their intellectual
Yeah,
property, which was
yeah,
whatever they were, however they were spinning it. But it
yeah,
was like, that was if there was something they could put a price tag on around, well,
yeah. Oh
how
yeah.
can we make this billable? That was sort of,
Yeah, and
it's made
that
for
was the
some
name of the
very
game.
strange, some strange days in
Yeah.
working with this. One question I had is when we were talking about this in class, actually, I did an introduction today of the S/4HANA. Basically, we did our lab exercise on this order to cash process using kind of the old stuff, basically using
Hmm.
the kind of the original web GUI thing. And
Hmm.
we did a demonstration of the new product, but basically the S/4HANA with the new interface, Fiori
Hmm.
interface, and all the neat stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been happening is that, the challenge that SAP has had is trying to get customers to adopt it. All right.
Hmm.
So they've been doing, I mean, this has been a project that was, it started off in 15, and, everybody needs to be off by 17.
Hmm.
It has to be off by 19, and then it has to be off by, and it's been this rolling target. And I think I was reading something recently where about maybe one third of the customers have chosen to remain on the old systems,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
it works. And it's one of the things I saw down at DuPont. I was actually having a conversation with somebody down there, and it's like, well, we're going to have to, I think we're going to need to upgrade. Well, no, we don't. We'll tell them what we're going to do, and they will support everything. The system's like 25 years old. It's like, there's,
Mhm.
how do you, when are you ever going to change it? Because actually, the
Yeah.
longer it stays in place, the harder it is to move it.
Yeah. No, it's true. And also something that a lot of people didn't look at is the more expensive it also got
Hmm.
because we had to keep teams around to
Well,
maintain
yeah, hold everything together.
the
Yeah.
old stuff. And so there was I had a conversation with one of the marquee customers
Hmm.
at SAP, and I was meeting with their CIO. That they had been customers, pretty much since they landed here
Hmm.
in the US.
Right.
And I was meeting with this guy, and they were the last company to be running a version that we called R2,
Right.
which was really a mainframe version of it
Second,
from
was it Dow?
from I didn't say that. And
Did the company,
but
did they begin with the letter D and end with W?
it rhymed with Al. But when I met with the guy, I said, give me one reason that you're staying with this,
Hmm.
with this old version. He said, I'll give you 200 million of them.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, the fact is, the longer you stay, the longer you wait, the more expensive it is for
Right.
you to move.
Right. And
They,
so long as it keeps working, then you can
yeah,
you just keep holding it off. But eventually, you have to get to the point where, there'll be some point where some circumstances is
yeah,
going to compel you to have to touch it. But I think one of the things, I think when I talked about a little bit of this in class, I think one of the concerns where this is rooted in. If you go back to the early days, like,
hmm,
the previous generation, the people who did the original implementations, they ended up anteing up, fantastic
hmm,
amounts of money to do these projects. That was kind of the
hmm,
reputation. Like, you start off with, we'll budget this amount, and then it ends up, by the time we
yeah,
budget here, it ends up here. All right.
yeah,
But I think, to some degree, I think it was like, well, we'll put this in now,
hmm,
get it working, and we'll never do it again.
yeah,
every time they change it, we're never going to, because the
Yeah,
risk of, is, like, you go in there, well, it's going to be another $200 million project, another $300
yeah,
million project, or
right.
north of that. If I look at, you look at some of the numbers around implementation efforts. So to some degree, you could see where, from a business perspective, I say, well, it's very nice and it's very, it's very cool and everything. But by
Hmm.
the same token, what's the business value? Because we're able to do, we can run our processes. Basically, we delivered that with our initial implementation and how we evolved it forward. But what else? What else are you going to bring? That the user interface is nice and some other stuff. But by the same token, is like, well, it is working and it is driving the processes, and we're not going to screw
Yeah,
with it. We have to run this stuff 24/7. And
yeah.
if we start monkeying around with it, we run the risk of running the clock back
Hmm.
back to the old days. And we're never going to do that again.
Yeah, and a lot of if you go way back and say, why did we do this in the first place? The answer is
Mhm.
really a cost takeout.
Yep.
You know, the and that, it's hard to do that twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you make those business decisions, and they're good decisions when you make
Hmm.
them. And then what happens is, somebody says, well, yeah, now I want to go to S4HANA.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you've probably had discussions around that with your classmates. I don't
Hmm.
have to go into the what is that, but in terms of making that move,
Hmm.
the justification is not a simple conversation. And it's a lot of money to do. And there's also an aspect of it. Now what you're doing is you're going to tell businesses that, guess what? You used to be in charge of all of this.
Hmm.
Like you had an IT organization that you handpicked, and they were
Hmm.
brilliant people. And now, guess what? You don't really need most of them because this is going to run
Hmm.
in SAP's house. It's a
Right.
cloud solution.
It's just going to run.
And and so why do that?
Yeah.
What's the reason? Can you really make the money off of those decisions? And that's a toughie one.
It's interesting what you said about the cost takeout function, because if you go back, I think when we had talked about kind of how that, because really the way we were talking about it in the class was kind of the whole continuum of, okay, we started off with mainframes and kind of went all, then PC showed up, and then we kind of got to the early 90s is where the introduction of this new stuff was. And we kind of talked about, it was the philosophical stuff, or I guess the theoretical stuff with Mike Hammer and
Yeah. Oh
order
yeah.
and their all their theories. And
Hmm.
it was kind of a combination of a whole bunch of things that kind of came together, and the idea would be,
Yeah.
okay, when you do this, you're going to rewire the business. You can fundamentally, you can take out costs. You can rebuild your cost structure around it.
Hmm.
And like you said, you've done it once. How are you going to do it a second time? And what's the
Hmm.
benefit? And then what's the risks associated with that?
Yeah.
It's interesting now, though, as I look at kind of what's happening with the AI stuff. Now, I know you had worked a bit
Yeah.
in ICIMS around developing the AI strategy, in that organization, kind of putting out
Yeah.
how that, because that basically was that was a software as a service platform that you guys were writing it, and you were looking to implement and incorporate AI
Hmm.
into that. Is AI,
Yeah.
did you see AI as it kind of as the ability to take as much out, or basically re-engineer the business to the same degree as what the ERP systems did?
Yeah, so can I let you know tomorrow?
Yeah.
Not tomorrow, I mean the day after. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I mean the day after that. So the you know what what the thing with AI, that I see, and I think everybody sees, is that you've got a situation that is it's oftentimes it's a solution looking for a problem.
Yes,
Okay.
I've heard that expression before.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
and that's really kind of where it is now. do I believe this is ass? Is one of them tossing? No,
Yeah.
I think there's a good future for
Yeah.
this coming. What the work that I did was really looking at the strategy for
Mhm.
internal use of,
Right.
these solutions. As iSIMS is a software company, a phenomenal software company that integrated before a lot of companies did,
Hmm.
integrated AI into the solution
Right.
and didn't come up with, and now here's the AI solution
Hmm.
that will sell you. It
Yeah.
was just in the
It was
fabric.
in part and parcel, which to some degree is kind of what
Yeah,
SAP is doing a little bit. They have their kind of
yeah.
taking their core framework and kind of AI enable.
Hmm.
It's at least that's how it looks on paper.
Hmm.
But it was sort of the AI
Yeah.
stuff reminds me a lot of the dot com stuff. If you go back
Hmm.
to, you started off in like 1990, it was a convergence in 1990, 91,
Yeah.
where the internet showed up and then PCs had gotten large enough and powerful enough, and you could get on the internet and start doing things.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, it was a gold rush. It was like
Yeah.
gold in those hills, and everybody came in and basically created a bubble. They said it was the tech,
Yeah.
and it was the tech, and it really was a bubble. And you kind of see, you see now a lot of story people go, "It's a bubble, it's a bubble,"
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like they're not wrong, And I think
Hmm.
just like with the dot-com stuff, there was actually at the core, there's stuff, there's value, there's a true value, you
Hmm.
know, but it doesn't just kind of walk in and just do it. I mean, it's not like, okay, well, just
Right.
get on the internet and everything is now better. Now you
Hmm.
still have to understand what you're doing. You have to still have to, leverage it to really get the benefit of it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So,
Yep.
all right. Well,
Exactly.
excellent. Hey, I really appreciate the time. I hope
Yeah, absolutely.
just it's a trip
It's
down memory lane here.
it's always fun.
Yeah.
I always enjoy
Anyway, I
talking to you.
appreciate so from LaSalle and my class, we
Yeah.
appreciate your wisdom, and we'll see how
Yep.
we go.
Best to everybody there.
All
Okay.
right, be seeing you now.
All right. Talk soon. Bye bye.
So let me